The Office of Community Engagement is proud to present the latest addition to our series of workshops focused on developing skills and gaining insights in the field of community engagement. Equity and accessibility in community-engaged courses during COVID-19 and beyond was held on Tuesday, October 5th, 2021. Today's panel will be discussing how to navigate community-engaged teaching, research, and projects while being mindful of the needs of students, faculty, staff, and community partners during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. The first question for our guest speakers, Bailey, Sara, and Barry is, the COVID-19 pandemic has illuminated accessibility and equity challenges in all of our lives, and we see this in our classrooms and research spaces as well. What are some of the specific steps instructors can take in designing courses to ensure they are accessible to all students?
Think about designing a course from many different aspects, and it could be the way that we start, thinking about the whole course structure. It could also include the way that we communicate this course structure with the students. And also we try to check in with the students throughout the semester about their experience with the course. So maybe one of the very first steps is to think about what kinds of goals and objectives we have for the course, and then the ways that we are going to assess students' learning and the activities that they want to do. When we as the instructors really are very clear about this whole process and structure of the course, then that really helps to see what we are going to, or how we are going to communicate that structure with the students. So then the next step is to make that alignment very clear to the students on the syllabus. That's about the course structure. So the way that the students see the connection between the goals of the course, and then what are the assignments for, what's the goal of that assignment, and then think about this is why I'm doing this activity. So all the time making that connection very clear to the students could be helpful to them in terms of designing the course. The other aspect of that is writing or designing the syllabus. Syllabus has a lot of different functions for the students. It's not just a kind of menu or manual for the course. It's also a way that students can make a lot of connections, can be very clear of the expectations about the course, and also see that how they are, basically belonging to that course. There are a lot of different strategies, a lot of evidence-based strategies to make the syllabus more accessible for the students. I'm happy to share with you some very cool, let's say, and very good and useful resources that are very much just trying to think about the ways and consider the ways to make syllabi as much inclusive and accessible as possible. For example, using images and alternative texts in the syllabus. For example, using a very cooperative language there, so that it's not just rules, it's not very punitive language in the course syllabus. It's very much the way that students feel like there is a lot of potential for flexibility in the course syllabus for them. And also the other thing that basically they're going to tell us is to empower the students through a kind of a flexibility in the whole, the thing that they're seeing in the course. So there are some strategies that we can do that. I don't want to take any, everyone's time for that. In terms of some steps, I can say first thinking about the structure and align the structure for the course, then thinking about, writing an accessible syllabus for the students in a way that they can see and they can understand that, this is an inviting language for me, so I can share, my background, my special needs, something that there is always a potential for them. And my final thing that I wanted to say is when designing the activities, when designing the kind of assignments, being very mindful about all of the students who are going to be in this classroom. And not that, in order to make it more equitable, if there is an assignment, for example, in a community engaged classroom, that students need to go outside, students need to do a task, being very mindful about being very clear about that task with the students, and also always opening that space for the students to have a space to come and talk about their challenges and concerns, so that they know that there is always a possibility for them not to change this assignment, but there is an understanding of their situation that they can talk about, and they can see what the alternatives are. This is just to start, and then I'm happy to continue this conversation.
That was an amazing start. Thank you, Sara. I really enjoyed hearing that kind of trajectory. And one thing I really appreciate is just thinking about, exactly like you said, the course design and the structure as like creating support. Maybe I'll branch off and add like also the schedule. I hear a lot about if there is, and I love a fluid schedule, but also sometimes students need some structure, especially, at least from our office, students with disabilities or some disabilities, not all. That structure can allow them to let you know their needs ahead of time. It also knows what to prepare for. It gives them a sense of to assess their own learning needs and communicate that more clearly to you all. I also think maybe as another step, because the question was about steps, when looking for a community partner, I think that starts probably and hopefully very early, so that you can start having that conversation around expectations and all of the really great things Sara talked about with a community partner, so that partner is really on board for the structure of the class, and you've established shared expectations, both in the UIOA class, but also with your community partners, so that that's shared.
Well, I'm learning something myself. This is good. I really appreciate both of your inputs. I would just add 2 additional things onto this. One is, one of the things I've been saying to faculty throughout the last 18 months is, best check your norms before you wreck your norms. We have really kind of run in normative ways for a long time of, this is the way I've always done this class, or these are the expectations that have always been the way that this class has been, or these are the assignments that have always been the assignments for this class. These are tiring, sort of in a lot of ways, not super fulfilling times for a lot of us, including everyone sitting in this room. And so it is okay to decide, like, normally we had 10 things in this class, and this semester we're only going to do 8. And to sort of put in some flex time of like, we're going to end class 10 minutes early so that you all can like step away from your cameras if that's where you are, and like chill out before you need to get on to the next thing. Or so you can just go out, just be outside before you go walk to your next class. And so it really is taking a look at our norms, because nothing is normative right now. We all went into virtual, we're now all in hybrid, and we're all managing so many new and different challenging things that we've never had to manage before, and the students are all doing the same, and none of it's one size fits all. Some of us are making much heavier lifts than others, depending on our identities and our access to resources and everything else. And so being thoughtful about what you ask in your class, and it's okay to take some things down a little bit this semester. The other thing I'll say about the flow of classes is, don't forget everyone sitting in your class is a human being, and we have the work in front of us, that's for sure, and there is the work to do. But it's okay to take a few minutes in each class and just check in to see how are folks doing, and temperature check, or go around and everybody can kind of say like, here is my rose for the semester or for the week, or here is my thorn for the week, and just allow folks to sort of just share their humanity in your class, in addition to engaging in the work that the class has in front of it as well. And it's not talk or die. Some folks are going to want to share on a week and some are not. But the nice thing about those group processes is I can learn something whether I talk or not. And so those are just a couple additional sort of like attend to the humanity of the folks in your class in addition to the work in front of you.
Excellent. Thank you all for that. The second question is, what are best practices for instructors to follow if in the middle of a course, a student has challenges, perhaps health-related or a personal challenge, that make them unable to participate fully in course activities, including community engagement projects?
I can start that one off. I mean, I think connecting them to the resources. Our office would be one, Student Disability Services. The Dean of Students, Student Care and Assistance is another great one. Barry's office as well, University Counseling Service. And doing that, I like that idea of the humanity, right, that Barry just talked about, like doing that while holding up their humanity. I think the addition of it being a community engaged course, I think that hopefully starts a lot earlier in that expectation setting of like plan for the unexpected. So how can we be prepared already for something to need to shift? So maybe there are ways to have in that expectation. It really depends on the community partner, but I wonder if there are ways to plan that so that there is some flexibility built in so that if and when a student does need to kind of adjust, you're ready for that adjustment or that shift.
You know, following what just Bailey mentioned that I really like is that it doesn't start from the middle of the semester. It really needs to be addressed from the very beginning of the semester, because that's a part of the course experience for all of the students, that we are all human beings. There are many things could happen to us, even to the instructors. So being very clear about there is a strategy, there is a procedure to take on, just being mindful about them in the syllabus, to say that in case of these things, this is what we can do. And, you know, I read somewhere that accessibility is not an exception, it's a rule in the classroom and accommodation. So something that they don't feel like, oh, it's an exceptional situation that has happened. It may make the students feel very uncomfortable in sharing, or sometimes like they don't know how to share that. But if we build in this culture in the classroom that there is an understanding of certain things that could happen to the students, and in these cases, this is the procedure, you can come to me first, and then there are some resources that can help, so that they're clear in advance to say that what to expect next. It doesn't double up their anxiety in that specific situation. And because in community engagement courses, there's also, as you know, Bailey also mentioned, there's also a community partner, there's a third party there, something that the students are very clear about. This is the procedure, so they don't need to worry about this, or it's a part of the agreement. So it very much in advance before they start the course. So they're very clear.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add to this. I appreciate Sara and Bailey's comments. Those are both really good. The term that was sort of circling in my mind around sort of the syllabus is like, it's almost an informed consent process with the students. Is like, before you agree to do this class, let's be aware of like all the conditions, the risks and the benefits, sort of the outcomes, other alternatives, and it's almost sort of an informed consent process with our students, which, like any good informed consent process, is not just at the front of the experience, but can be done multiple times as things change. The other thing I was thinking about, and I hear this from students, is students often come to us as faculty and say like, I've got a problem, go fix this, take care of that for me. And we're all tired too. I mean, honestly, we're all tired and doing the best we can. I think it's okay to sort of be open, as my colleagues have suggested we do, with a student, and then say to the student, I'm interested in your ideas. With setting some expectations, because the student could come up with the idea of like, well, I just won't do it. And so it's okay to sort of lay those sort of larger rubrics of like, here are some expectations for you to keep in mind. You still got to hit the objectives of the class, but why don't you give some thought, come back to me with your ideas, and then we can kind of shop those between us, rather than the student comes with problem, expects you to fix, and then is disappointed when you didn't come up with what the student was hoping. So just taking a little look at that dynamic and how do you partner and collaborate with client or with student around those requests.
Those are all such great ideas. And that actually segues beautifully into my next question. And this is more of a personal question, because I feel like in a lot of meetings with staff faculty, they ask, well, how do I make sure I'm not being taken advantage of by students? And so the question is, how do instructors balance accommodating student requests while ensuring that classroom expectations, and with community engaged courses, especially community partner expectations, are met?
You know, if I can, it's for myself. When I first saw this question, that was, I needed to think about and consider a lot of different resources that we have already talked about, used, or even offered faculty members. And I can honestly say that there is not a very specific single answer to this question. But the one that, you know, comes to mind at this point is to think about, you know, the ways that we are facilitating this collaborative culture in the whole course, you know, context for the students. What is this course experience with, you know, like with for the students? One of the strategies that could be helpful is to think about different episodes throughout the semester to check in with students' experience. To think about, you know, provide the students with an opportunity to share their concerns, to share their thoughts. There may be something that could be addressed in advance. There may be some things that we need to just on the spot, just be strategically addressing at that point. But checking in with the students and then and thinking about how to just make these balances and how they are experiencing this connection could be very helpful, because we're talking about students' learning experience, whatever that we're doing with the community partners in the course design with the students is to support their learning experience. So checking in with them could be one way to do this. The other, and I really loved Barry's, you know, I can say strategy that I myself just took note of, to be mindful about students' ways of understanding and even the options and alternatives that they can think of. Not to take that absolutely, but being mindful and caring about what they have to share there. The only thing that from a pedagogical perspective I can share is that there is a framework, an evidence-based framework called Transparency in Learning and Teaching that really talks about being very clear with the students about the expectations, about the process, I mean, the goal, the process, and the criteria of everything that they're doing. And because in community engaged courses, it becomes a little more complicated for the students. Being mindful and aware of, okay, so this is how it's working, this is the process, these are the expectations, may help everyone in this community, in this dynamic, be very clear about you know, the process, and they can identify. It may empower us to identify the different barriers that are on the way of this, keeping this balance. That's what comes to my mind from a pedagogical perspective and also equitable pedagogy perspective.
Yeah, that's good. Before you all came to this, I told Noelle and Nick, I was like, I hope I have something to say. And now, now I can't get this guy to be quiet. So go figure. That's how it rolled. So a couple of things with the idea of being taken advantage of. I think a couple of things. Being taken advantage of in this sort of setting assumes a little bit of a patriarchy, right? It's sort of like, I'm in charge, it's my thing, you do what I say. And when you don't do it, then you're taking advantage of the situation. And so part of it is, what are the expectations in the class, which is, here are the objectives you will accomplish this semester. Here are the sort of activities that you'll engage in. Here are the outcomes we're trying to achieve. And that's on the student, right? The conditions are set up. And so if the student says, like, I'm not feeling well and I can't come to class this week, then it really is upon the student, through assistance with you if they need that, to then sort of make sure they're still achieving the outcomes and goals and expectations of the class. But the idea that they're trying to take advantage of me, again, assumes a certain level of assumption there. And so I always question when faculty raise concerns about being taken advantage of, is what are your assumptions and expectations of students and how they interact with the expectations of the class. The other thing that I think is really helpful, and we hear this from students all the time, is they want to hear your humanity as well. When I'm sort of like the distant, kind of like stand above and outside of the class and kind of handle the class that way, it's easier sort of not to make connection with us as people. And so I'm not looking to my students for their support per se, but I think it's been helpful to be transparent with my students to say, like, struggling, like, this is tough. And here's kind of like, here was my struggle for the week. And here's how I either made good on it, or frankly, I didn't. I just ran out of energy this week is maybe what happened. And sort of that connection, I think, again, sort of builds a little bit on the shared humanity that's going on that can go on in our classrooms. And I think also then can minimize a little bit of that dynamic of being taken advantage of, or students struggling in a way that feels like maybe it's not entirely truthful. And so our transparency helps model and hopefully parallel to our students being transparent back with us.
I'm loving this. This is like, I'm taking notes. I always take notes to kind of put things together, but I'm really appreciating just hearing both of you. I've got some resources to look up. And I might just also add that kind of in that same line of being taken advantage of, I think my own personal practice right now in teaching is trusting students to get what they can get and trusting that education is more than content. I really believe that this is a time in students' lives where they're evolving in so many ways that go beyond content, and I'm there to support them in those evolutions. I also want to jump back to kind of Sarah's ideas around checking in points. When I taught a community engaged class, something that was really helpful was having that partner come into the class and talk about the norms of the space we'd be going into, what were sort of the structure set up, what might be the challenges. And then I did one-on-one meetings with students after that to check in on what their concerns were, how they were feeling about it. And then we also did a debrief after we ended up in that community. And I had met with the community partner this semester before to have a conversation about my expectations for classes, which went around like how I value diversity, the way that looks in my classroom, and if they would be able to respect that in their space. So I think that like periodic check-in, even 5 minutes, which feels like a lot, does so much to meet with a student one-on-one. I haven't found a replica for it because in some ways, especially with students who have concerns, their email just doesn't do the same thing. Yeah.
So speaking of resources on campus, what kind of resources on campus are you all aware of and beyond campus that can help community engaged teachers, researchers, and other community engagement practitioners continue to improve accessibility in their work?
I'm looking at Sarah. Sarah, I feel like you might have, not to put you on the spot, but you have a lot of really great resources for pedagogy. Do you have any in this world?
Thank you, Bailey. So I think, I was thinking about the different resources that we are working on. One of them is that OTLT, has 4 different units, and we work at Center for Teaching. We work with the instructors in their teaching plans and everything that is related to pedagogy. So in that area, we have different resources, different conversations with faculty members or instructors even, and also graduate students to under strategies. We discuss and brainstorm strategies to make their courses more inclusive for the students. So, and also accessible for the students. So we have specific events or even conversations, one-on-one conversations and follow-ups to make syllabi more accessible, to make course activities more accessible, to just build in inclusive learning environments. So it could be more on the pedagogical aspect of that. Even the other units on in OTLT, for example, our academic technologies unit is a resource that is very much helpful in making the teaching tools that you instructors want to use and then more inclusive for the students. So they can have a lot of different conversations with the instructors to say, if you're going to use icon, for example, these are the ways that you can, these are the potentials in icon to make it more accessible for the students, or Panopto, how to use the transcripts, for example, whatever that is potentially a feature for these online tools that and instructional tools that could make it more inclusive for the students. And also, our other learning spaces team and also the other learning and analytics, we are we are working all together as a resource to be as a resource for the instructors to make their courses more accessible for the students in the pedagogical area. And we are always very happy to work with the, the Office of Disability and other offices on campus to see that how else we can support. So these are some of the things that we can do.
I guess I'll say our office also with specific accommodations can consult. We provide, if you have an accommodation you have questions about or how that might translate into or how it might apply in settings that include community engagement, that's a blast to have that conversation and think about how does this work in this other setting. So that's one option as well. I'd also say with accessibility, inclusion, and community engagement courses, I always would point back to your field of study. There are people doing this work across the nation and the globe that are experts. Like I know in dance about a few that I follow because I know that they are leading the research in accessible dance practices. And so I'd also say like, use your research and study to collaborate with those folks who are doing this work in your field of study. Connect us to them. That'd be amazing.
Yep, I don't have anything to add on that one. That sounds very complete.
I just wanted to add one more resource on campus, and that's the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. They have some very good, events, training sessions on accessibility. And also they have always wonderful insights and ideas about, it's not just about the classroom, but it's about the concept and the process of making things and making all of the different community contexts more accessible. They always have wonderful resources and insights there too. And they're also a group that we, in our own words, we thought partner a lot on different things.
Thank you so much. And if you think of other ones, or in fact, if anyone in the meeting has any resources that you'd like to share with the group, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm sure we'd love to learn from each other. The next question is about advocacy and how the people in this room can be better advocates. And so the question is, how can we as staff, faculty, and administrators better ensure students with disabilities are always incorporated into our teaching and research and engagement work? So put in a simpler way, what can the people in this workshop do to be better advocates for students with disabilities?
You know, before the pandemic hit, I would go to a very large lecture that a colleague in another department would invite me to. And she was like, come tell my like 400 students in my lecture about kind of like well-being and mental health and services on campus and all that. Great, love to. The things that she did that I don't see enough of faculty do is she would get up and the first thing she would say is, so Barry's here from the counseling center, but before he gets up, I want to tell you, when I was an undergrad, I struggled a lot with depression. And when I was struggling with that, I went to the counseling center and here's kind of how it went and how it helped me. And I think, you know, we often turn to like models and we turn to data, and that's all good stuff. I don't mean to demerit that at all, but a narrative or a story or one sort of own experience being shared with the students, I think advocates in a way that I think we don't emphasize enough, because it's not academic ease in sort of how we present it. But the importance of story and narrative and shared experience, I think, just carries a lot of weight. And students are aware when faculty do this, and they're certainly aware when faculty don't, and have different reactions to us when we will share our own. Again, I'm going to keep coming back to the humanity piece of this, just given the nature of our world right now, that when we sort of share our humanity, especially now, I think it really does advocate for our students in a remarkable way. The other thing that I think is really critical, and you know, it's on us, is to talk about these things and not rely on the students of color in my class to bring this up, or not rely on my student who is hard of hearing to bring this up in class. It's just because I don't belong to a community doesn't mean I don't have a responsibility to that community. And so it becomes critical for me to say, if this is you and you are in this class, or maybe you just sort of say like, I'm always going to use the microphone. I'm not going to say to the class, can you hear me in the back? I'm just going to use the microphone so it doesn't rely on the one student in the classroom every single time to say, could you please use the mic? Any of those kinds of things. Or I might step into a class and I might say, today's Yom Kippur. Did you know that? Do you know what Yom Kippur is? Here's a link, please go look it up, you know, and begin to sort of talk about those things. And me sort of advocating for groups that I don't necessarily have membership to, again, also begins to communicate a dynamic of, here's how we do this, is we all have to step up for each other and engage in that shared humanity. So those are a few ideas about that.
Just to I can say, to just say and express how much I love and agree with what Barry said, I can just say that one of the ways that we can be advocates in the practice, because the way that, you know, our word is praxis word. I mean, just we think about how we can incorporate what is there, what is in the research, in the practice of teaching. So in that word, one of the kind of ways to be advocates practically is to start all of our communications courses with the students with community agreements. And these community agreements are inclusive and mindful of all of the students. So if a student feels like because they weren't able to hear well, or they needed more support in, I don't know, visual support, that's why, I mean, they need to raise that, and then there is a change. It may not be equitable for them, but if we are very mindful of creating community agreements from the very beginning, that all of the students feel included from the very beginning, that could be a strong advocacy for them, because we are fostering their sense of belonging in this whole community. That everything that is set up from the very beginning is also being mindful about the ways that they are present in this learning community. And I also wanted to share something about the stories that Barry just shared. And there was a workshop before pandemic by the Division of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion on accessibility. And I remember that what they did was that they brought students to the session, and also staff members. There was a wonderful, powerful conversation, because we were listening to their experiences and the ways that they were telling us that. And it was all from an empowered perspective. It wasn't like we need this, or it wasn't like this. It was like, this is what we are doing, and then this is how this learning space could be more supportive of what we are doing. So the whole context was very much based on real life narratives, but from a very empowering perspective, rather than let's give it to them because they need it.
And I think that sense of belonging is also strengthened by, like, I tend to question when I think of students as a monolith, as a same whole, and whether that be around ethnicity, race, disability, the economic status. I think that often hides people, and that can make the teaching forget someone. It is a way of cleaning, messing over. And so I think that's something I always think about, is like, what are the particularities as well as the generalizations? How can we go micro and macro at the same point? And I also think, like, evolving, language changes, identity groups shift and change, the context around people changes, and therefore changes their experience. And so I think that's another piece of it, is that language that was appropriate to use 20 years ago around disability is no longer appropriate. Language that was appropriate last year could also have changed. And also students then, their relationship to that language changes. Within my little scope of disability, students have very diverse ideas about what terms they want to use to describe themselves with disability or mental health or physical health. So I think one kind of clear advocacy step is asking them, how do you talk about this? What terms do you like to use? And that sign of respect can go really far to just starting and building that beginning relationship, so that when something does come up that's beyond just having a conversation about who we are, that there's at least that ground floor. I had a student once who told me, I prefer to talk about myself as spiced. Like, I was like, all right, we're going to use the term spice, you know, and that just built a really great kind of foundation for the relationship.
I stuck the address for the ombuds in the chat. When I think of advocates on the campus, I think of the ombuds office fairly quickly. And I think undergrads in particular think that, hey, they're not even sure what that word means if they've even seen it before. But once hearing about it, I think sometimes our undergrads in particular think the ombuds office is something that like staff and faculty do, but they absolutely serve our student body. And so part of my syllabus is I always message into my syllabus that, like, if you have concerns, worries, if you just need an advocate that is really sort of just for you and doesn't report really to anybody else, which is unusual on this campus, the ombuds is really an excellent resource. And so I just put that in to remind and share with everybody about that.
Thank you all so much. Those are really great pieces of information. So the next question is kind of about marketing and communications around community engaged courses and other community engaged experiences. So as a lot of people in this room probably already know, research shows that college students who participate in high quality community engagement programs experience a wide range of benefits. However, data also shows that college students nationally, students who have resources are most likely to be involved in community engagement programming. And so how do we in this room message and communicate about accessibility and inclusion to all students so that they know that they're able to participate and that we make our opportunities like well known and accessible to all types of students and not the ones who are already able and inclined to participate in these opportunities?
I'd just like to share universal design for learning. And that I've been thinking about that as far as our marketing for student disability services. So it's a very complex theory. It's got lots of components, but the basic way that I think about it is making sure that you're sending information in multiple formats, multiple senses, hearing, seeing. I haven't figured out the smelling one yet, but smelling, can you read a infographic? Is it typed up? Did you also hear it in class? Did your friend tell you about it on a text message? Did you see it on social media? So really trying to think as complexly about the many different ways, because one, makes things accessible, and two, is in many different spheres of a student's sort of world. So I'll start with that. There's more to universal design, but that's kind of where that idea comes from for me.
I was thinking along the lines of things of, especially with community engagement projects where students have to go out and navigate other systems potentially, is being very thoughtful about how much we ask students to do in terms of navigating spaces where they maybe have never navigated such a space, or they come from a community where the spaces we ask them to go to, they simply don't trust them. And so there can initially be some really helpful pieces of early on, a lot of hands-on. And then as you sort of like build your comfort and begin to navigate sort of like an external experience, as an example, there's sort of more backing up and sort of just being aware of the kind of that developmental process. And again, our ability to navigate spaces are simply just not going to be equal across all of our students. And so offering options, some students may want more hands-on initially and some may want less, or it's just simply doing a developmental approach to it where it's just very hands-on beginning so I can help you navigate and then beginning to back off as you sort of make your own grounding with those things.
The only thing that I have to add, to these wonderful, let's say procedures and strategies is to sometimes it starts with students' goals and then what we call in the word of course design. To say, and not that it, for a specific, basically for a specific goal, or course, but the fact that we also rely on students' understanding of community engagement and then what do they want to get out of that. It could also give us some ideas about the ways that we would like to communicate the value and also the different opportunities of these courses with the students. And in the world of course design, we say that whatever that we want to do for designing the course, we should also be mindful about the situational factors. And these are all of the factors that inform the way that this course experience could be. Everything that is about students, course, instructor, and everything. In community engagement, there is also a community partner. So helping and empowering the students to think more thoroughly, and in the way that we are communicating, encouraging them to think more intentionally about why they are doing this, what they want to learn out of this, and then helping them to see the information that they want to see, in these different ways of the communication of the community course. So this is basically community engaged courses. So this could help the students to be also to learn how to see themselves and situate themselves in these contexts.
Thank you so much. So the last question that we have on our list, and then we'll open it up for anyone in the workshop who wants to ask their question. This one speaks to kind of like student privacy and a student's willingness to come forward with a need they might have. So the question is, can you discuss the balance between respecting student privacy and recognizing some students may not feel comfortable coming forward with these accessibility needs?
I think what we discussed earlier today about checking in with the students could be one of the ways that there are different ways that we can make it anonymous, or we can make it something that is a one-on-one conversation with the students, so that the students feel like the goal is not to put them on spot or identify them in a way that is harmful for them, but the goal is to support them. In this context, sometimes just thinking about the different boundaries that you're setting with the students, we always talk to instructors in a way to tell them that even if it may be your specialty, but in the classroom, you're not the counselor. So you are a teacher in this classroom. Your role is to facilitate that learning experience for the students. So if there is something that students feel like they need to talk to you about, a private matter that is impacting their learning, it's important to think with the students about, this is how I'm going to support you. I will keep it, in your private, in between ourselves, but this is the resource that could help you further. So the students know that the resource that is they're going to be connected with is also in a way that they have their own, basically principles to keep that privacy too. What I'm trying to say is that it is a matter of the way that we interact with the students. It is the matter of how we set those, that context for the students, that they feel like their confidentiality is observed. And in this direction, the goal is to support them and to address that issue that they're just being faced. So just making that very clear to them that we may need to offer another resources to you, and this is going to be the process for you. That would be more promising for them to say that this is what privacy means at this point. And they know that this is just between them, their instructor, and also the office or the resource that could be of their support. Yeah.
I think you said that so beautifully. And in there you talked about the learning objective and also the barrier. And when I'm talking with students, I'll focus on that and say, you don't have to disclose with any faculty member. Really, the goal of accommodations and the goal is your learning. So talk about the learning and what you need to learn. And so I think that's one way to also respect privacy, is to say, hey, how can I help with your learning? And use resources to help also assess what might be helpful. And I also come back to that idea of like being proactive. So if you've proactively thought about course design, did all of this proactive work, ideally, the space is really accessible and inclusive to begin with. And then things come up, of course, that back to that humanity. I'm pulling lots of threads. Things come up and then these conversations happen. But I think that if we have that proactive base and then can really focus on the learning objectives that are clearly defined with clear expectations and collaboratively with the student, you kind of bridge to that space.
Well, I want to say, we're about 5 minutes before the end of our hour. So I want to, first of all, thank all three of you for our conversation today. This has been so helpful for me, both as somebody who's a community engagement professional, but also somebody who teaches. I've been taking notes as you guys have been talking. And I find that happens all the time with these sessions, is that I learn so much from everybody. And maybe that's one of the benefits of all of this, right, is getting us together to hear from one another. I hope that all of us today are sort of taking away from this the importance of, I keep hearing about like being purposeful about how we design our courses, how we design our interactions with students, how we design our interactions with community partners. And I hear this a lot from instructors and people across campus about sort of this additional piece to the puzzle when community engagement is a part of our courses. And I love everything we've discussed today about making sure that we're being really purposeful about how we set up our relationships and our partnerships and our interactions with students, as well as the course itself. So I really do want to thank all the three of you today. There's been some incredible resources that have been dropped in the chat today. The other thing I'll tell everybody in the room is that this has been recorded, and I should have mentioned that to begin with, but this has been a recorded workshop, and we will put this then up on our website, so everybody can go back and reference this and view as much as they would like. It may be a day or two. We'll run it through our YouTube and make sure that all of the transcripts and everything for it are good to go, and then we'll get it up on our website. The other thing I would note is that if people have other questions that they would like us to send to this group, please just email either me or Noelle Mills, and we would be happy to then get back to you with any answers or additional pieces of information or advice. And then the final thing I would just say is just to reiterate that please do check back with our office for future workshops and events. And I really do like to hear from all of you about what's going on in your community engagement worlds and what you want to hear more about. Today's workshop is a direct result of people across campus, contacting our office, asking us about accessibility needs this semester, asking us about the intersection between engagement and accessibility. So we want to do more workshops that meet your needs. And so with that, I want to thank all of you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. I know I've heard from everybody that this is the busiest semester in years. And so the fact that all of you have taken an hour out of your day to join us and to learn about this is really inspiring. And thank you to Bailey, Barry, and Sara. You guys are incredible. We appreciate your partnership. And I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day.